What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ask for Candy, where we talk about healing, self-care, love, sex, relationships, and what it takes to be amazing on the daily. Who I am is Candice Harper, lovecoach.com, honey. And my purpose with this podcast is to create healthy romantic relationships all around the world through self-love, soul connections, and sweetness. But before we get to that, we're here with our production partner, Celebrity Magazine. And we're part of Celebrity TV. I'm here with my Brian, who's the editor-in-chief of Celebrity Magazine. Hi, my Brian.
What's up? What's up? What's up?
How you doing, honey?
I'm good. I'm good. We got this whole Indian fall going. It's like warm here in DC, so it's like a little crazy. But
Right? It was
I'm
warm
loving
here.
it.
I was happy about it, but then it always feels weird because you start thinking about climate change. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, it's nice that it's warm. But then you're like,
Yeah, it's a little crazy because it's like, a few weeks back, all the mosquitoes and gnats and all that stuff died, and you weren't like looking
yeah.
for them. Now they're back. Like, okay, I think
Right.
that they're kind of like thinking this whole thing is weird too. But if it's 75 and it's December or January, I am not going to complain.
Right. We'll enjoy it and just put the worry in the back of our minds. Because if
Ooh,
it's 75 in December,
I
then
know,
things ain't
right?
right.
I know, right? I'm looking forward to this show, by the way.
Are you? Are you excited for the show?
Yeah, and you guys have to wait till she tells you about it.
Right. Little teaser just to get them, get the mouth watering. So yes, you can watch us at celebrity.com because we are partnered with Celebrity Magazine. And you can also subscribe to Celebrity Magazine on YouTube. And as you guys know, we're live here every Wednesday at 7 Eastern. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our audio broadcast, our podcast, Ask for Candy on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can email us at askforcandypodcast@gmail.com to leave us comments and ask questions. And those questions will be answered in a later broadcast. So as you guys know, those of you who normally listen, for almost 9 years, I have been a relationship coach and a workshop facilitator. And now you can go to mywellbeing.com if you want to work with me one-on-one. I've been doing all kinds of new stuff, Brian, just all kinds of like new tools. I'm getting my hypnotherapy license in rapid transformational therapy, which is really interesting.
Wow.
I know, right? And I'm certified in EFT. Do you know anything about EFT, the whole tapping thing?
Yeah, actually, my mother introduced me to that, and
Did
it's a
she?
powerful thing. I think people need to know more about it.
Yeah, it's, at some point we'll do a show about it. And we had talked about, I do want to start bringing on guests again, like I used to back in the day. And I
Whoop,
did
whoop.
have a woman come on before I got certified. I had a woman come on and she and I did a whole EFT practice on the show. And
Hmm.
it was all around love. I'm a big believer in it just because of how it sort of like calms the nervous system. And like, especially if things like, how sometimes something will happen and it feels like an upturn.
Right?
Like you could be going along in your day and then, all of a sudden something unexpected. I'm one of those people that gets a little anxious when things are unexpected.
Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.
Exactly. So the EFT helps with that. Like, if you're one of those types of people who has anxiety around the unexpected. And what's funny is I enjoy the variety of life. And usually like after the initial surprise of it, I'm like, oh yeah. But that initial, how are you with that sort of thing, Brian, when it comes to like shock and surprise? Are you somebody who rolls with it, or are you like
It all depends upon what the surprise
what the
is.
surprise is?
I
That,
mean,
yeah.
if it's something that's unexpected and something that is, I won't say negative, because I
Yeah.
mean, there's always growth in each thing that we experience, and I kind of like look at it that way most times. Um, I just get still.
Gotcha.
I've learned to just get still, and that took a long time to do that.
Yeah.
The process. But yeah, I know for a lot of people it's difficult because, like you said, it's like you get anxiety about these things that are brand new. So
Yeah. Especially in this ever-changing world that we're in right now, where it feels like when something does upturn, it's a big deal. Like
exactly,
a
exactly.
shift can happen and all of a sudden you're locked in your house for 7, 8 months.
I've
Right?
never had that happen before. Oh, wait a minute.
Right. It's never happened to anyone. But yeah,
Womp
so,
womp.
what's that?
Womp womp.
Right. So a lot of the work that I do is around that sort of thing. Like, how do we just navigate through, and how do we, deal, and how do we, it's, yes, so I'm coming from a space of self-love and your love life and all of that stuff, but a lot of it is about like solid life management and, being able to be healthy and comfortable. And I'm also a professional matchmaker with a company called Luma, luxury matchmaking service that brings high-end singles together to find their perfect love. And it's just me living into my purpose, whether it's the EFT or the hypnotherapy, the coaching and the matchmaking, it all ties in together. It's all about what is at the most basic level of our human need, which is love and acceptance, and how to create that in your life, how to have that in your life. And I'm living into my purpose, the purpose of loving myself unconditionally and inspiring others to do the same by using our romantic lives as a portal. And there's other portals that we can use, but for whatever reason, the romantic life seems to be, to me, the most direct one, right?
Nice.
And it's also a catalyst to our highest possible self, because we talked about, even just in a couple shows ago, how, we feel like relationships are hard, because the point of relationships is to be a catalyst to our highest possible self. And that's what we're here for. We're here to play in this playground of,
Loving it.
right, growth, and how the people that we run into, the people that we connect with, and the people that we deal with can grow us. And so, I always say relationship coaching is my zone of genius. And the best part about it is that week to week, I get to grow and learn as I interact with hundreds of people around the most intimate part of their lives. And I get to take people on their journey from caterpillar to butterfly, unhappy with their love lives, unhappy with themselves, to, happy with their love lives, happy with their partners, or even ecstatic with themselves. And I get to teach people how to get out of their own way and tap into love as a limitless resource. And so I say all of that to say tonight's topic, and I was telling Brian a little bit before we started, tonight's topic is it's a vulnerable topic for me. And I feel like it's important to put it out there, because I notice from clients and people that I deal with on a regular basis that it's a vulnerable topic for a lot of people, or it leads into things that are vulnerable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know me, Brian, I like to keep a certain level of levity with all of it, at least for the show, because I don't, I often don't want us to get too heavy.
Exactly.
But I also think that there is something to be said for, what is there for us and what is real for us, what feels real for us, and being able to express that.
Right. Right.
And talk about it in a way that is vulnerable. And we're so often so afraid to be vulnerable, and we associate vulnerability with weakness, and emotions with weakness. And I was reflecting today about how in a lot of relationships, whether familial or romantic or even friendships, I've always been told that I'm overly emotional. Which is true, but not in a pejorative sense. Like I am a very emotional person, and I wouldn't change that about myself. But a lot of that comes from, or has been expressed by, the topic that we're talking about tonight. And the topic tonight is fat and lonely. Is it COVID, or am I just repeating old patterns?
Yeah. Powerful.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I mentioned it earlier today in my workshop training, and it really set off a lot of sparks, because I feel like, especially during COVID, it's what a lot of people are facing: the isolation and the eating in the isolation. And you and I were talking about the stress eating, and going through what feels like it has a good reason, but is possibly a lifetime pattern. So in my work as a coach, one of the issues I run into most often is people who believe that they are alone because they are fat, or they are fat because they are alone. Right? So there's an interesting dichotomy between those two things.
Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That's usually the complaint.
Chicken or the egg.
Is it the chicken or the egg, right? And so we talk a lot about how our beliefs dictate our experience, and how much our beliefs can sort of form what we create in our lives. And so if I'm walking around believing that I'm alone because I'm fat, which it's a belief, because think about how many fat people who are in relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a story. It's not true. Like
Exactly.
nobody's alone because they are fat. Have you ever watched that show, My 600-Pound Life?
I have watched it, actually.
And how many of those people have a partner
Damn
who
near
are feeding
90,
them?
like 90%, 95% of
Right?
all of them. And they all like, okay, well, we're gonna lose weight together,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or that person is their enabler, like they're bringing them all the food.
Right. Like,
Right?
right. You just need to eat this gallon of ice cream. It'll be all
Yes.
right.
Exactly. So I mean that, in itself proves that it's not true that anyone is alone because they are fat. And the opposite side of that, the other story is I am fat because I'm alone. So, that negates the responsibility of all the steps in between. So, I'm telling myself a story about being alone, so I'm overeating and I'm stressing about it and all of that. And that's what, is supporting having fat, not causing the fat, because we're going to get into the conversation of what causes us to be fat, what actually causes us to be fat. Right. And also COVID has added a completely new layer to the conversation, because it gives us all a damn good reason to isolate and eat. Like we've all had a really good, valid reason
Mm-hmm.
to, right, keep ourselves alone, or as alone as we can be for, however big your family is or whoever you isolated with, but to keep ourselves alone and to eat, because, there's only so much Netflix you can watch and only so many things that you can actually do, or that you want to force yourself to do in a space of already being stressful, or that you choose to do. And so for a lot of us, that was sort of the coping mechanism, like we were talking about earlier. And it also gives us a good reason to sink deeper into the fears and the trauma that were likely already there to begin with. So a lot of us are going around saying, oh, I gained that COVID weight, or I'm stressed out because of COVID. And we're negating the fact that there was already stuff there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I see where you're going. Yeah.
And it's a hard conversation, because I did it myself. There was a period of time where I was starting to gain during isolation. Luckily I lost the weight again, but where I was starting to gain during COVID. And that's the justification that I would tell myself. Well, I'm not going anywhere. Wanting to do something about these stressful feelings. I need to placate myself. I need to comfort myself. And so it's all okay. It's all okay that I, overeat and maybe aren't exercising as much and all of that stuff. Simple stuff. However, it's exactly how we sort of trick ourselves and sort of lie to ourselves about what's really going on and what fat and loneliness actually is. And here's the thing about it. This is not a conversation to make anybody wrong for feeling like they are fat and lonely, or identifying themselves as fat and lonely. What the invitation is how do I recognize fat and lonely and then use it for freedom and solution as healing? How do I take it and say, what are you trying to tell me, fat and lonely? So that I can then experience some level of healing behind it. Does that make sense, Brian? What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes people, to what you were talking about before, I think a lot of times we confuse symptoms with root causes,
Yeah.
and that the eating is, or the stress eating is a symptom of what you said, something deeper. And maybe we make it a root cause instead of a symptom because something inside of us doesn't want to go there.
Yeah.
Doesn't want to go there.
It's a scary place to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a scary place to go, because fat is the body's way of protecting us from what we fear. right? So our trauma,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? We fear dealing with our traumas. We fear dealing with, maybe negative attention, the pain of loss, not wanting to feel that pain. So, the fat that accumulates on our body, it's protective. It's our protective suit. It can be a protective suit. So even when what we fear are things that could be good for us, like for example, fear of intimacy, fat is a really good way to like keep yourself from having to be too intimate, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
physically intimate.
And like you said, I mean, being overweight does not keep you from being with somebody.
Yeah.
From what you're describing, we keep ourselves from somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, but what can often be the case is that, if I let myself get fat, if I'm afraid of having somebody be too close,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I can keep saying that I want to be close with someone, but if I have a fear around it, or if I want to keep somebody away,
Mm-hmm.
I can allow my body to, and it's not conscious. We allow our bodies to accumulate the fat, and that's a great repellent, not because that person's not attracted, but because we can use it as our excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't feel like I look good, or, I'm embarrassed about my body. I have a lot of body shame. All of that stuff is the way that we employ fat to guard us from the things that we fear of success. So,
Right.
when you think about all the things that you could possibly do, if
Mm-hmm.
you're not walking around with the extra stress weight,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like who you would be, how you would show up, not just what you would look like, but or what you'd wear, but what kinds of things would you actually have the courage to do,
That's true.
right?
That's
Without
true.
it. Or even like a fear of being seen in general, because like like I said, fat, it's an encapsulator, it's a built-in isolator, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you have a fear of being seen, that fat will isolate you. It's our body's built-in isolation tank.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're onto it. I mean,
You think so?
really. I mean, and again, I mean, everybody out there. I think sometimes we blow off this topic because it becomes, oh well, it gets blown off as cliche, right?
Mhm.
But it's not. I mean, a lot of people, specifically in this country, are dealing with that level of anxiety. I mean, because America, generally speaking, is obese. I mean, we eat more than other countries do. We waste more than other countries do in terms of food. Our intake of different kinds of things are higher, and it's all designed to taste good so that we keep doing it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, that's why it is designed that way, and it's why the food industry is so successful
Right.
at addictive food, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we do have that emotional stuff that we don't want to look at,
Right.
right? That we don't want to heal. And so you might be thinking like it all sounds crazy. Like, I don't want to be fat. Fat's not protecting me from it. I'm not trying to be fat.
Right.
I've just been eating because I'm nervous, or eating because I'm stressed out. And I think that's where we go to, right? That it's
Right.
as simple as that. When in fact, if you're anything like me, I'm gonna, this is now true confessions.
Okay.
For anybody out there who's
I'm
listening,
shining the light on your forehead now.
are you? It's already there.
Speak, speak, and forever tell us
Right?
the truth.
So if you're like me, you've gained stress weight and had moments of utter loneliness when there was no pandemic, when you were in a relationship, and when you were doing all the things you knew to do to try to take the weight off. So it didn't
Mm,
matter what was going on externally. So for
right.
everybody who is in the story that because of COVID, now I've gained a lot of weight, and because I'm feeling stressed and uncertain, that's just what's happening to me.
Right. Right.
We want to be
Right.
really flat with that. This is not the first time, and maybe for some people it might be, but for the most part, when we gain weight from stress, and when we have these moments of telling ourselves that we're in utter loneliness, it we try to blame the external, but we serve ourselves better when we're willing to look internally, and how we can heal that. So tonight I have some questions that are
Dum
all
dum
about
dum.
that are all about how do I get in touch with those things, and how do I allow what's going on with my body to actually speak to me in a way that I can use it for healing, right? Rather
Mm-hmm.
than, and get out of that cycle of, well, I feel fat and alone, so I'm going to eat some more because I feel sad. I'm going to eat some more because I feel sad, so then I feel fat and alone. Like, we want to be able to break out of that cycle. And the way to do it is to not make yourself wrong for it, not beat yourself up for it, not go into a body shaming thing, because this is not about body shaming. It's about, listening to my body, what it's trying to tell me, and, why I'm holding on to extra weight, and what it's all about, and being willing to be in the inquisition.
Right. Right.
So if you are frustrated with being fat and feeling alone, and whether or not you're in a relationship, because the fattest and loneliest I've ever felt in my life, I was in a relationship. And it
Right.
wasn't that, I'm not saying that to say that it was that person's fault, but we want to get rid of that story as well, that it's not about your relationship status or any of that. If you are feeling fat and alone, stick with us, because we are going to talk about how you can use the power of your mind to feel your physical best and be able to keep and maintain a healthy weight permanently, and free yourself from the beliefs and emotions that may be keeping you fat and lonely, because it's really all about the mind and what the mind is saying. So yeah, that's our task for this evening. Do we want to take a little commercial break, Brian?
Yeah, why don't we take a quick commercial break, and then we'll
Yeah.
jump right on into it.
As soon as we come back, we are going to talk about how you can use the power of your mind to keep your body healthy, in a healthy physical state on a permanent basis. So welcome back. We are going to talk about how you can use the power of your mind to feel your physical best, keep a healthy weight permanently, and free yourself from the beliefs and emotions that may be keeping you fat and lonely, honey. Fat and lonely. Don't they sound like such harsh words?
Yeah, I mean, but I think we got to do that because I think it hits people between the eyes.
It does hit people between the eyes. I think that people use words sometimes, like, and this is why I want to reiterate that it's not a wrong making, because we do use those words. We use words to beat ourselves up, right? Like, I have clients who come to me and, those are the words that they use. I feel fat, I feel lonely, I'm stressed out, all of that stuff.
Right.
And it's a common thing right now. And so, let's diffuse those words a little bit, because it's not about being an insult.
Right.
It's about, not arguing with reality. If I've gained a lot of extra weight, I've got fat.
Right. Right. And just use it as the unemotional noun instead of the emotional criticism.
Yeah. I mean, it can be, it doesn't have to be a negative adjective. It doesn't have to be a negative noun. It is what it is, right? Fat is what it is. And the emotion, the feeling of loneliness is something that we create, right? And it's not about being wrong or being right when we create it. It's just being able to look at it and say, I've created it, right? So like I said, this morning, I was working with the leaders that I train with, and they're led by my mentor. And we're learning ways to, facilitate workshops. And in doing so, we're training our minds to continue to grow. And it's kind of like emotional yoga class, right? We're there to increase our strength and flexibility. And we were talking about, how to develop this. And I shared that I wanted to talk about being fat and lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And, this group is so rich and creative. And this is the questions that the conversation inspired.
Okay.
And so, Brian, I welcome you and invite you to answer the questions as well. But I'm going to ask them, and I'm going to ask anybody who's out there watching to be answering the questions in the comments. If you resonate with fat and loneliness, I resonate with fat and loneliness. I have found myself in that place at different times in my life. And it's a story that I still sometimes tell myself, even though I'm all about taking care of myself and growth and, have lost a lot of weight and all of that. So if it's something that resonates with you, or if you have something else that parallels the feeling, you're welcome to talk about it in the comments, to answer the questions in the comments, and be there in the conversation right along with us. So the first one, when you think about your fat, who is your fat, and what happens if you personify your fat? So Brian, you and I were talking before about how, like, maybe fat doesn't resonate with you. If it's something else that's descriptive about your body or some other symptom or some other thing that you want to use, I'll answer first just to model it. And then Brian, if you want to answer, you can answer around whatever you want to answer around.
Okay.
So, the question, who is my fat and what happens if I personify my fat? So if I think in terms of being fat and lonely, who my fat is like a monster, right? A monster that is possessive and enveloping. I think of that movie, The Blob. You know how the Blob would just suck people into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I personify it, it's a blobby monster person who just wants to take over my life, wants to dictate who I am, wants to be in control of how I relate with other people, and wants to keep me from being too big. Right? Mm-hmm. Wants to keep me from growing and being big. And how do you personify your thing? What do you want your thing to be, Brian? And how do you personify it?
That's a good question. I want to say it's a combination of what you just said, like a blob-like thing, but I would add to that, like, did you ever see the movie The Fog?
Yeah. Like a long time ago.
Right,
it's like
and like
concept, but it's a fog.
Right, and it's like this thing that's like, waiting to suck you in, and then you have pain from it after that.
Yeah.
And so it's dark. Very dark, very sludgy, that kind of dark, sludgy, thick kind of energy.
Yeah.
And that, I think that would be the best description of it.
Got it. I got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you said like a dark, sludgy energy.
Yeah. That's kind of like that, like a blob kind of thing, but not like, like it's more centered on consuming and ever spreading, right?
Yeah.
Where it's just out of control. That whole, like, you don't have any control over it. That's where that movie The Fog, where it just kind of rolls in and you don't have any control over it at all. That kind of deal.
Yeah. That's interesting. So yours is a dark energy you don't have control over. Mine is an all-consuming monster that tries to control me and put me down. So my mentor in our facilitation this morning, she said a great thing. She was like, so, where else have you felt those things? Like, what else does that describe in your life? Right? Like, if you think, and it goes deep, because then
right?
you start thinking about the past, like where else in my life have I felt like there was a monster that was trying to consume and control me? Like for me, around the fat. And for you, where else in your life did you feel like there was a darkness that would come to you and cause you pain?
Oh, well, that's easy. That goes back to early childhood, like some of the traumas that I've had back then. I mean, I won't go into specific detail because that's a
Yeah.
whole nother show. Um, but
That's this show, but I'm not going to push you.
oh, okay, all right, all right. And y'all out there, don't be asking me about it either.
Right?
Um, no, but I know it's childhood trauma. That's where it comes
Yeah.
from. I know it immediately. It's the same. It's the same feeling,
Yeah.
right? I could name it. I could describe it as a different thing, right? Like personified. But when I look at it as just purely as an energy construct, it is the same energy.
Yeah. And same here for me. Like I could go back and I don't want to, everybody knows that I do like my book is around healing with your mother and stuff like that. But, I go back and I think in terms of maternal figures in my life. And even though that's all healed now and I love my mom and all of that stuff, it's like there's still that story in my mind and in my body for why the fat comes, because that's what the fat reminds me of. So when I think of something that's like trying to keep me down and control me and is kind of a monster, that was the way that I at one point perceived the maternal figures in my life. Right? Like I'm keeping you down, I'm controlling you, I'm going to envelop you, engulf you, too much control. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
we share all of that to say for anybody who's also listening, it's like that's what you want to just get present to. So if I personify my fat and I give it some descriptive words and some description about who it is and what it is, and then associate it with, and I'm trying not to be too esoteric. I want it to be really simple. But associate it with when I have felt that before, I get to pinpoint exactly where my healing needs to begin.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because if I haven't healed where whatever that original thing was,
Right.
if I haven't gotten clear about its existence and I can't speak its name and I keep trying to pretend like it's not there, that's how it shows up in my body,
Right.
whether it be fat, disease, or whatever. But as soon as I'm willing to speak its name, so if I'm willing to speak what my perception of my relationship was with my mother and maternal figures in my life, and I'm willing to heal that, I have an opportunity to free myself from the fat that causes that feeling over and over again, that reminds me of that feeling over and over again, that has the same job
Right.
as that past hurt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, that
Yeah.
really resonates with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's how we, our mind causes our healing, right? Is that willingness to get really clear about where it began, not so you could get revenge
Mm-hmm.
or, point fingers of blame or anything like that. But even sometimes after we feel like we have forgiven a situation, the reason that we still suffer in our bodies is because we haven't fully healed that for ourselves. So a lot of times just getting clear on where it originally came from is the beginning of that healing. And then another thing that we can do is ask it, what is its job? So now that I have personified my fat, and my fat is this monster that's blobby, that's controlling me and engulfing me, what is its job? What job does it have right now? And if I would give my fat a job when I'm overweight or I'm letting extra weight be on my body, its job is to give me an excuse not to do the things that I say I'm going to do, especially the things that I'm afraid of or the things that I don't think I'm good enough for.
Right. Right.
Right? Its job is to remind me to just sit my ass down because you're not good enough to do whatever it is. And so I don't
Mm.
have to then be brave. I don't have to overcome the fears. I
Right.
don't have to get certain things done because I can go back to, well, I'm not feeling good because I'm 20 pounds overweight.
Right. 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 It's a distraction.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a distraction. It's a safe excuse and people will co-sign it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, think about how many, especially, like for people who have friends who also deal with weight. It's like you can sit around and have those conversations where you, and this is true for other sicknesses as well. Like if you have other people who have them as well, you can sit around and say, yeah, it's so hard to do this when I have this and when I have that.
Right. Right.
So its job is to keep you from being who it is that you'd really want to be if it didn't exist, right?
Yeah, them Popeyes fried chicken sandwiches available again. I can't pass it up.
We could just go do that.
Right. Great question, though.
Yeah. So
who is your fat and how is it personified? How do you personify it?
How do you personify it? What is its job? What does it say to you? What is it communicating to you? And what you answer out of that will pinpoint you to where that original hurt is that is still left unhealed. And so when you get to that original hurt, it's like, maybe it is an issue of forgiveness. Maybe it's just an issue of that I'm still carrying around whatever I told myself when I suffered whatever trauma that was. Right. So if I say, I have a perfectionist mother who was very hard on me. And so as a young kid, I told myself, I agreed and what was ingrained in me is you're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. So the way to survive that is to put things in my own path.
Right.
So that I never have to be good enough. Right. Because I have these excuses.
Wow.
What do you think? Do you think I've overcomplicated it?
No. I think that's a great first step, right?
Yeah.
Becoming aware, right? I mean, that's the first step, becoming aware. Of why you do the things that you do, right? And in this case, why, because I think that people who are doing this, like we have, on some level, we are conscious of it because we have the feeling that comes with, like, I know I'm not hungry.
Yeah.
I'm really not hungry, but this will make me feel better. Well, and then you feel bad as you eat.
Yeah.
Right.
And even worse after you eat.
And worse after. So you're conscious of that part. So it's just moving into owning and being fully aware of what that means for us. So no, it's very straightforward. I think it was great.
And speaking its name, because I do think that a lot of times we struggle with speaking the name of the things that we've been through, especially in childhood. And even if we've dealt with them and, we feel like we've forgiven or we've moved on or we've stuffed it down or whatever, we don't want to speak its name and we don't want to revisit it because we feel like it's going to somehow take us, back down that road. But what we often don't realize is that we continue the suffering by pretending like it didn't exist, especially when we're in some sort of struggle with our body, because that our body is going to want to get it out. Right. So if we don't consciously allow ourselves to get it out in some way, this is what therapy and coaching is about. Like, once I've identified that, yeah, there is something back there that tells me, you're not enough. So you need something outside of you, whether it be the food or whatever. The piling on of the fat is necessary to protect you from whether it be the danger, the success, the whatever you're telling yourself. It's like, if I can name it, if I can identify it, if I can call it what it is, and then I can heal it, I can change my beliefs and have a different experience with my body. And my body doesn't need to then find other ways to protect me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Great.
It's interesting stuff. And it can be a lot. I mean, that's why it's good to have support. It's good to have, the supportive therapist or a coach or, just someone who knows how to bring you through this sort of thing. The other thing to deal with is the loneliness. So, what does your loneliness look like? What happens if you try to personify your loneliness? So a lot of the people that come to me, obviously, because I'm a love coach and through the matchmaking, loneliness is a big theme, right? But loneliness is an emotion and something that we feel that's based on something that we're believing about being alone, that there's something wrong with being on our own. So we make it wrong, right? For whatever past traumas told us that it has to be wrong. And so it becomes this thing, loneliness. Loneliness is where I then have to pack on the fat. Loneliness is where I start to go into my depression. Loneliness is where I start to feel like I'm not good enough. This feeling of loneliness. But if you personified it, like who is this person loneliness? What is loneliness like? And it's funny because we, in the workshop this morning, we all made the face to personify loneliness and everybody looked like a zombie. Everybody was like everybody went into their sad face. Right. And I would say loneliness is a deeply sad, if you've ever known anybody who is just a drag of an individual.
Oof, yeah.
Right. If I were going to personify my loneliness, if I felt, when I felt loneliness, they were just a drag. It's a person who just it's like a Debbie Downer, somebody who just does not want you to be peaceful, happy, fulfilled, or to feel good. Loneliness is like the fun killer, right? A fun killer type person. How have you ever felt loneliness, Brian?
Yes.
And how would you have personified your loneliness?
I personify my loneliness as when I was growing up, I think I was a nerd, but I think I was a cool nerd. But
yeah,
at least I did. I thought I was.
You thought you were a cool nerd?
Yeah, because I'd read encyclopedias, but I'd also read GQ. So
yeah, okay. So you were Stefan Urkel and Stephen Urkel
at the same time. I was the perfect blend.
Yeah.
No, I remember reading in. You remember the World Book encyclopedias? I mean, I don't even know if they still exist. But I remember reading about Saudi Arabia and then seeing like the deserts and stuff like that, and I thought about that my loneliness would be personified as that you're in a desert and you're alone.
Yeah.
And there's nothing for miles and miles and miles and miles but sand.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't beautiful. It was like, oh my God, how am I going to get out of this?
Yeah.
Or how can I stop? How can I see at least somebody, then I won't be alone? So, yeah.
So, I mean, that makes sense because that sounds like, if your loneliness were atmosphere, like atmospheric, an atmospheric element, right?
Yeah.
What if you made your loneliness an actual person? Like what would, if loneliness were an actual person for you?
Then, that's a good question.
Right?
I think it would be like not necessarily a scary ghost, but like a ghost that's in your house. It's just occupying space and you just never know when it's going to be around.
Yeah.
And so you're always not at ease.
Yeah.
Because
like
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be it for me.
The ghost of unease.
The ghost of unease.
The ghost of unease, present and past. Yeah.
For Halloween, everybody. That's for Halloween.
Right. The ghost of unease.
The ghost of unease. Just for you. Back.
So that's and then the next thing would be, okay, so if the personification is that it's the ghost of unease, and for me the personification is it's the drag of a human being, like the Debbie Downer of a human being, then it's like, where else does that or has that shown up, and what does that relate to in your life?
Well, again, I think this goes back to my childhood. And I would say that in part it's a reflection of what the child in me understood to be the aloofness of my birth mother. Right?
Yeah.
The feeling of that, it's, you know, that even though she was there, she was not there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's brilliant, Brian.
I thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, because I believe that that's,
Yeah.
it's like that's a great way to pinpoint where the healing needs to
Yeah.
be,
Well, I
right?
mean, everybody, it was a long, long road.
Mm.
I mean, but I knew that I had to do that. And I was supported in doing that.
Yeah.
And again, and my upcoming book in 2021 will be no. No, but that's, that's where that feeling comes from.
Yeah. Ah, that totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And if for me, when I personify my loneliness, that Debbie Downer, that drag of a feeling, and as for any family that might be listening, I love y'all so much. I really do.
Mm-hmm.
But like I come from, especially my father in particular. My father, he's an amazing father, and I'm so grateful to have had him and all of that good stuff. But one thing about him is he is the voice of doom.
Right. Right.
Right? Even from
Right.
when we were little kids,
Mm-hmm.
everything was, and I know as an adult that it came from a place of wanting to protect us
Right.
and wanting to have us be warned of all of the darkness of life and to be aware of it, especially since he was raising women. But even to this day, like he can focus on the dark side of something and just like fixate on it and grab onto it. And it's every possible bad thing that can happen. And so for me, it's the same thing. It goes back to childhood and whatever I told myself as a child, being in a father-daughter relationship with a father who was always taking it to the dark side. And this is something I'm just discovering as I'm saying it. I didn't think about this before because these questions are new.
Oh.
This is miraculous stuff. I hope those of you who are listening, and even if you're watching later, that you're doing
Yeah.
this along with us.
Yeah. I
Right.
agree.
And it's not to drudge it up like, oh, let me victimize myself with it. It's to bring it up, to put a label on it, put a name on it, to see what it is, say what it is, be okay with that's what it is, so it can stop affecting us now. Right? So I don't have to be in this story of loneliness. I can recognize it as that's just an old familiar feeling from back then. And I don't have to hold on to it now. I don't have to have that old familiar feeling of this, this uneasy specter in my background, because
Right.
that's from back then. I don't have to have this, old familiar feeling of it's all gonna go to shit.
Right. Right.
Because that's what's in the past. Right. And I can recognize that that's where it came from. Doesn't mean that I got to hold on to it. And it doesn't mean that it has to be what is my life now. What do you think about that, Brian?
What specifically? I mean, in terms of like what specifically for that?
Like when you think about that, like what I was just saying about identifying it, naming it, labeling it, and being able to get where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
Like what would you intuit would be the next step once you've done that? Like, and we're creating this as we go, because this is
yeah. I mean, the next step, once you're aware of it, specifically if it's with understanding it from the point of view, not as you as an adult, but these are learned behaviors as a child. So you have to couple the awareness of it with an understanding of it. Otherwise, you're projecting your adult self backward, right? Into the past, into a child's mind. So you have to make sure that you are understanding that the pain or the hurt or the fear or whatever you're feeling, and how the personification of that has come about. is really from a child's mind.
Yes. Like the child is still running the
Yeah,
show.
the child is still running the show.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure that you understand that piece first. Then the transition is forgiveness.
Yeah.
Forgiving yourself for carrying that water all that time.
Right. Absolutely. That's self-forgiveness.
Right.
Because did we know any better?
No, we didn't.
We
That's the whole
didn't.
that I mean we don't. And I think, you know, again, I use the analogy of carrying the water, right? I mean, we bring that stuff forward.
Yeah.
And it's why, you know, doing these kind of exercises and then getting support if you need to get the support,
Yeah.
professional support to help move through it is so important.
Absolutely. I mean, if I think about, and the reason that I centered it around fat and lonely, if I think about the ebb and flow throughout my adult life of my weight, right? When it was up, when it was down, when it was up, when it was down. And anybody who's ever gone through that, where, you were telling yourself that it was something external that was causing it, and you're doing everything. And I did everything I could. And I'm so masterful at the logistic things you need to do to get in shape, right? The things you need to, like what you need to eat and how much you need to exercise. And I'm not a nutritionist or a trainer, but I've done it enough times in my life that I
Right.
probably could easily get some sort of certification in it.
Right.
But just from having to do it for myself. But the reason that it never stuck is because it took exactly what you're talking about, that willingness to go through this process and have an understanding so that I could figure out where to forgive. And what was the first thing that you said instinctually you felt like would be the first thing to do?
So I think that the first thing to do before you move into forgiveness is to couple that forgiveness with in context, right? Understanding that, and again, the understanding part is the part where you may have to get some support in really diving deep. You just can't say it and go, oh yeah, I forgive myself. You really have to take yourself back.
Yeah.
And understand that this was the child in you
Yes,
that
that's
made a decision about what life was all about and how to do, and created a coping mechanism of how to deal with that.
Yeah. That the child
That
did
the
it.
child made a decision.
Yeah.
The child and the child didn't know any better.
Yeah. And the child could still be doing it. And I know for me, the child was still doing it because every time the adult would take over and go ahead and lose that weight and do what I wanted to do as far as that's concerned,
Right.
the child would kick right back in because I hadn't identified it.
Right.
I hadn't acknowledged it. I hadn't, nurtured it, forgave it, loved it, through that original trauma.
Exactly.
Yes, honey. I feel like we broke this one down a little bit. I hope people got through it all.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I hope that the people who are watching this even after the live broadcast will really think about this and get some help.
Yeah.
We don't go through life alone. We just don't.
We don't have to.
We don't have to, and it's just not true. We don't go through life alone.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Great show. Great topic, Candy.
Thank you, honey. So here's the takeaway. Ultimately, whether we like it or not, fat is one of our body's ways of expressing our deepest and darkest emotions. And I know that with the body positive movement, that can be a controversial thing to say because we want to pretend like, self-acceptance is, I can be as fat as I want to be. And as long as I accept myself, it's all fine. And this is not about whether you should or should not be fat or whether fat is or is not wrong. So if we could take that out of the conversation, so it doesn't feel like it's any sort of shaming, and just understand that fat is one of our body's ways of expressing our deepest and darkest emotions and protecting us from that which we do not want to look at with our hearts and our minds. And it's not about looking like a supermodel. It's about questioning the thoughts and beliefs that make our body respond with excess protection. Also recognizing that there is a price to pay for that protection, and to choose whether or not we want to spend our lives paying for it. So all of the, whether it's the fat or the sickness or whatever, it does have its job. There's a reason why the body invents it. But when we get aware of why it's there, where it came from, we get to choose, do I want to spend my whole life in this bubble of, protection, which I'm putting in air quotes? Do I want to spend my whole life in this bubble of what's keeping me from who it is I really want to be, and just living as free as I want to live.
Yeah.
And out of a cycle. And I know that I'm not going to spend my life paying for the protection. I want to be out there. So, I want to heal my heart.
Living it up.
Living it up. Healing our hearts.
That's right.
And speaking of what Brian was talking about earlier about support and help and things like that, there's a lot of different outlets. I'm a coach. I'm not a clinical therapist. I do feel like if you feel as if, bless you, honey, if you feel like you have real emotional mental sickness, then you do need a clinician. If you just feel like you want some emotional wellness, you want some emotional conditioning, think yoga class, I facilitate an epic circle every Monday night. It's an online healing circle for women everywhere. And we come together as a community and we cause personal transformation. I use a lot of different tools. Some of them are similar to what we did tonight, but I have other tools that I use that are all about how do we pinpoint beliefs? How do we pinpoint the origination of certain things so that we can heal them, clean them out of our space, and actually cure ourselves from things that have been plaguing us for a really long time, whether it's things that, our beliefs that cause anxiety, our beliefs that cause sickness, all of that. And so we'll be causing personal transformation when it comes to communication, forgiveness, self-love, mother-daughter relationships, purpose, friendships, just all the tools that we need to be as big as we were meant to be. And we just started collective number 2 about a month ago, but people can continually come in. And all you got to do is go to meetup.com, join the meetup page, and you'll find the link to go ahead and get registered. The very first workshop is 100% free. So that's it. Thank you so much, Solivity Magazine, Brian, editor-in-chief.
Well, you know it.
Passion,
I can't wait till we get to the matchmaker stuff.
Huh? Till we get to the matchmaker stuff?
Yeah, I know with that it won't be this week. It may be, in a couple weeks.
Coming up soon. Yeah, I want to figure out how I want to bring back, because we were doing the matchmaker moment, right?
Matchmaker moment.
So maybe it'll still be the matchmaker moment. I'm trying to figure out how to, fuse that in, because now I'm at a new matchmaking place that has a different kind of cachet. So I want to give it justice and all of that. But we're going to work all that out, especially for those of you who are out there single and you want to be matched.
Mm-hmm.
Right. On Instagram, you can follow us at Ask for Candy Podcast, at Candy Love Coach, at Solivity Magazine.
Yes.
And what else? Shout out to the Ask for Candy podcast group.
Yes.
Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel for Solivity Magazine.
Yes.
Right. Don't forget to email me at askforcandypodcast@gmail.com and send your questions.
Yes.
Right. Most yes. Send your questions and comments, and they may be upcoming topics of the show. And until next time, never forget that you are a love machine. If you ever start to feel like you aren't getting the love you need, just make more and then ask for candy. Mwah, mwah, mwah. I love you.
All right, we are out. Watch Ask for Candy with Candice Harper every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Solivity Magazine brings you the best in inspiration on Solivity TV. Check out our new shows. Mark your calendars for Solivity Magazine shows by going to solivity.com now.